We are in a unique moment in history in that the entire world shares a common goal. And that goal is to stop the spread of the coronavirus. It's unique even in comparison to world wars because in this case, no country gets to claim neutrality. This virus will go wherever it chooses and it must be stopped. You and I know that an effective way to stop the spread of the virus is to wash our hands often with lots of soap and lots of water. So, in order to accomplish our goal, we go to our sinks often. We turn on the faucet, we pump the soap dispenser, we lather up our hands, and then we let the clean, fresh water flow over them for 20 seconds. It's easy. But what about people in places of the world that don't have access to soap? They have the same goal. They want to stop the virus because it affects them the same way as it affects us. What about people in places of the world who may have running water, but it isn't clean? What about people in places of the world who have no running water at all? Their only access to water, clean or not, requires a many miles journey. See, our abilities to accomplish the same goal with the same method are different. You and I have advantages that other people in our country and in the world don't have. And so accomplishing the same goal requires more effort, more creativity for them who don't share our advantages. And the reason I say all of this is because all believers in Christ, wherever they're found, in our country or around the world, we share the same call. And that call is to follow Christ. But that following is not a generic, cookie cutter, one size fits all kind of calling. It has to be done, this following, every day in a very personalized way by people who live in the midst and the tangle of very different circumstances. People who live in the midst of advantages, people who live in the midst of disadvantages. And that's why we have to pray for people. Pray for one another, particularly those who have multiple factors at work in their lives that make their lives one of great difficulty and great disadvantage. But the truth is that all of us are disadvantaged by sin. But the good news is that the gospel moves us from victims of disadvantage to victors in Christ who promises to lead his people universally in triumph. Jesus has made it so that his people can follow him no matter what the maze or the tangle of their circumstances, no matter what their advantages or their disadvantages. Following Christ requires that we also live in the midst of God's sovereignty and his providence, of hearing God say, I have this life for you. You will bring glory to my name, and you will bring help and hope to others through this life. So this morning we're going to talk about the very personal nature of what it means to follow Christ. What does it look like for me to follow him? Knowing how to follow Christ faithfully, it requires a very personal encounter with him. To follow Christ well, we must get personal with him. To follow Jesus well, we have to get personal with him. I'm going to stop the video now and give you a few questions to think about. The first one is this. What are your biggest hesitations? Your biggest hesitations about getting really personal with Jesus? Maybe you're not comfortable getting personal with him. Maybe you don't even know how to get personal with him. Maybe you believe he doesn't want to get personal with you. I don't know what the reasons or hesitations are, but think about those. Secondly, what exceptions do you grant yourself in following Christ because of the life you've been given? What exceptions do you grant yourself for following Christ because of the life you've been given? And thirdly, why do you grant yourself those exceptions? When you finish thinking through those questions, I'm going to ask you to read the passage for yourself. John chapter 21, verses 18 through 22, and you need to know this. I am going to wring every drop of truth that this passage contains for us about following Christ, or the word we use interchangeably about being disciples of Christ. Because that's the commission that Jesus left with his apostles before he ascended to heaven. He said, as you go into the world, make disciples. It's why we exist as a church. We seek to become a community together of faithful followers, faithful disciples of Christ. And so we're going to keep coming back to this conversation that takes place between Jesus and Peter on the beach for everything that it can teach us about being faithful followers of Christ. So when you've finished answering the questions and reading the passage, let's come back together and begin working our way through it once again this morning. Lord, bless your discussion